please turn the music off. I've done this before. Thank you.
Oh, Adrien.
Honestly, Richard, if I had to design the worst possible type of speech that an actor would give...
I would love you to do that for one of your columns.
I couldn't have done it as well as him.
They're so used to being on a massive screen saying incredible things and making people cry, but not something that they wrote.
Yeah, crying from being moved rather than wishing it would stop. So Oscars, yes, Richard, they took part.
Heard of them?
I have heard of them.
Yeah.
I've sat through quite a lot of them over the last few hours. I suppose we're definitely going to be talking what they tell us about the state of Hollywood. Spoiler, not great. And but it was a huge night for Anora.
Yep. Hollywood has gone Anora Batty.
They've got...
That's what, funny. Again, a lot of what I say doesn't work for anyone under 45, does it? Can I just say to anyone who's 32 and just listen to this on the cross trainer, that is a pretty good pun.
Right. Yes, it certainly, it was hosted by Conan O'Brien, who I don't think did too many puns at the Oscars, as far as I'm aware, but it could certainly have livened it up. He did a perfectly good job, very good, very competent, very whatever.
I liked him on The Brutalist when he said, I loved it so much, I hoped it would never end, and it didn't. 3 3/4 hours, The Brutalist.
Very bold to say that during the Oscars telecast, I must say. Very, very bold.
Yes, which also overran by quite some way. Who'd have thought?
Oh, my God. I mean, honestly. Okay. I mean, and also, I suppose the trouble in some ways with Will Smith's thing is that you do spend all the rest of all future Oscars thinking, is someone going to do something? Even if it's very bad and morally bad.
It's really terrible when you're sitting there going, I wonder if someone's going to hit someone.
Yeah. I hope someone's going to hit
maybe
someone.
Maybe one of the firefighters will hit someone.
Yes, so they had a sort of tribute section at the start to Los Angeles, the city of dreams and all that sort of thing. And Adrien Brody won Best Actor and did a speech that I am going to talk about later because I think it was one of the...
You know what? As I was watching it, I was thinking I would like Marina's take on this speech.
I mean, well, that was longer than The Brutalist, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to be another form of brutalist about that type of speech coming at this moment in the kind of Oscars history. Because I suppose what we have to ultimately say about it is, as an event, it is 90% of the Academy's who decide the Oscars, 90% of their funding and probably about the same amount of their attention comes from this. The movie industry is synonymous with this. Fundamental question, did that make you want to watch more movies or movies at all? I think that Hollywood's place in the culture is pretty difficult right now. We know that they're in a period of sort of arguable crisis and definite contraction. Mainstream culture has changed. The monoculture, whatever, the shared culture is gone. And so movies that were the zeitgeist, were everything, things that, I mean, we've said it before on the podcast, but, The Godfather would now be a small art house film seen by very, very few people, perhaps in the way that something like Anora or whatever is. And
I know it's not part of the point, but I think there's only 2 of the actors who were nominated were amongst the 100 highest grossing actors of the year, which in the olden days you'd have had a few more, but I think it was just Zoe Saldana and Timothée Chalamet.
Last year you had the Barbenheimer phenomenon. A lot more people watched the Oscars last year on TV, by the way, because they had seen, I think, because they had actually seen some of the movies in that top 10. 2 of that top 10, the 10 Best Picture nominees, 2 of those were kind of had massive kind of commercial success, which were Dune and Wicked. Six out of those 10 were definite art house, niche, which, not denigrating that at all, because, I love.
No, you got to have it. That's the point. Yeah, you've
got to have it. And 2 of them are in a foreign language. The Academy in recent years has tried to be much more internationalist because they felt actually that would diversify it in lots of different ways. Whether that is a total success in terms of promoting specifically what it's supposed to, the Hollywood film industry, I'm not sure. They always tell you when you're going on, and if you watch any of those things last night, you'll see that nothing has really changed in decades. There's a monologue at the start, then various presenters from the industry come on and do a little tiny rehearsed bit and give an award. Okay, and they used to tell you before you went on to be one of those presenters, 1 billion people are watching. Right? Okay. We'll wait to see the ratings. They take a while to come out for this for various reasons. Last year, they had a boost where they had something like 19 million. And it's all in the US, by the way. 5% of the United States watches. Now, percentage-wise, and I've got to start comparing things to The Chase. Although, have I?
No, I think it's fine.
I love, The Chase is excellent and amazing.
And what are the Oscars if not a Chase?
Percentage-wise, the Oscars gets less than in our country, percentage-wise, The Chase gets on like a Wednesday tea time. The Chase does not have wall-to-wall coverage for months. Elton John doesn't do a Chase party at the end of every episode.
I bet he does.
Maybe he does.
Any excuse for a party.
The Vanity Fair Chase party is not a thing. The idea that this is it's massively culturally relevant is sadly not the case. It's in many ways it actively annoys the mainstream. They are waiting for someone in some ways to sort of do. I mean, Daryl Hannah went on and said, Slava Ukraine, it's a sentiment I agree with, but I don't need my politics from Daryl Hannah. The one thing we can say these days is that I
want my mermaid movies from Daryl Hannah.
I want my mermaid. Yeah, I do not want my mermaid movies from any of the political commentators at all.
Yeah, any more than I want a mermaid movie from John McDonnell.
No. They are supposed to be the elite entertainment community. And I think the show itself, it is primarily a TV event. Remember, it's invented as a TV event to publicize the industry. You're supposed to be the ultimate entertainment kind of people. I think they have to change it. It's becoming, the Grammys are very fortunate. The Grammys is hugely watchable. Things like the Brits, those sort of things. They're lucky because what they're promoting is little 3 or 4 minute things, songs. And they can have lots of them and it really works. It's a spectacle.
And they don't have to worry about actors turning up.
No. This is primarily an industry that produces IP-driven franchise movies. Most of its capital and most of its talent is turning up in these movies, and yet they can't be talked about really on the night. What does that say? That it's totally a prestige film night, that they've kind of ghettoized this idea of things that might get us awards. I found it a very revealing night, and I think it's really brings the crisis into sort of super sharp effect. The thing I found most interesting in many ways, and I didn't watch the American telecast, I watched it on ITV, but thank you to the Ankler for pointing this out. There was one advert for a movie in the entire telecast.
It's amazing, right?
I mean,
so the whole thing, the biggest night of movies of the year, and none of the studios chose to advertise any of their upcoming movies.
There was a
within the Oscars.
15-second spot for the John Wick, the ballerina thing. This is owned by Disney, by the way. This is as a TV event. So Disney pushed Disney television shows. Yeah. Well, lots and lots of different, and Hulu and FX and all their different brands. But movies that are coming out, I don't know, like Snow White, Thunderbolts, that under the Marvel mark. Are you not going to push them at all in the movie broadcast?
And it is that thing of not being in the cultural conversation so much anymore. And it's happened slowly and then very, very quickly. You look at the top 10 nominees there for Best Movie, and some great films in there, by the way. You would not waste a weekend by watching most of those movies, just like you never would. But if you imagine the top 10 TV shows of last year, you would have 10 shows that people had very strong opinions on, that everyone had binge watched, that everyone knew they loved one of them and hated other ones of them, where there's incredibly powerful competition between the streamers and the broadcasters putting those shows on. It would have everything that the Oscars used to have in the 50s and 60s and 70s. That's where the industry
and 80s
is now.
I mean, even you could still have those movies that everyone went out and saw, even though they would now be completely regarded as art house.
But some good news. I think Anora is a very worthy winner of Best Oscar. Is one of those ones that I suspect won't. There's some Oscar decisions that have aged very badly over the years when you look back through the lists. I suspect this one won't. Sean Baker, who directed that, I think I'm right in saying is the first person ever to pick up 4 Oscars for the same movie on the same night, due to the fact that he was the producer of the movie. So he picked up Best Picture with his wife, Samantha Kwan. Second year in a row where a husband and wife, by the way, picked up the Best Picture Oscar. He won Best Screenplay, he won Best Director, and he won Best Editor because he does everything on that movie. He won all 4. Disney, I think, won 4 Oscars in a night before, but for different movies. He's the first person in history to win 4 Oscars for the same film on the same night. That's some going. Sean Baker, who sounds like someone that you used to go to primary school with, but turns out to be had the most successful Oscars night of anyone in history.
It's a wonderful film. I was happy that Mikey Maddison won.
That was a big shock. Everyone thought that Demi Moore would win, but it just goes to show, and I predicted that Demi Moore would win, one of my many predictions that went wrong. But Mikey Maddison took it instead.
Well, that was a good thing that they did, because I can tell you what the Academy did, because honestly, Demi Moore's would have been like the equivalent of a participation medal. I don't think anyone should get, which they have done many times, by the way, a kind of tacit lifetime achievement award, because people think, oh, they've just been around for ages and we haven't given them anything. Sometimes they do it with directors and you think, okay, of all the movies that Martin Scorsese was going to win for, was The Departed really it? Of course, Mikey Maddison far more deserved it over Demi Moore. And it's good that they don't get into things like that. Where the buzz happens around this event is on platforms that are sort of not controlled or owned by Hollywood or the studios or anything, or even, the broadcasters in any way anymore. It's all on sort of Instagram and TikTok. It does huge traffic on those sorts of things, but they don't own that conversation, and they can't monetize that conversation. No. To some extent, that conversation can happen all the time, because you see pictures of celebrities all the time, and there are people talking about outfits and what have you all the time. But when this happens, they just can't find a way to bring it back in under their own aegis, as it were. It is completely lost now to those platforms, these things. It reminds me. And some events have just become like that. Something like the Met Gala, which is just totally paid for in some ways, quite literally, by things like Instagram. And last year by TikTok. But I wonder if they're going to have to lean more towards those kind of platforms if they try and modernize this in some way that is going to try and get it back into the conversation in a way that they have a form of control over, I suppose. Yeah,
I think you're 100% right. I think that I've always thought, you look at the Best Actor and Best Actress winners, Adrien Brody and Mikey Maddison. If you were watching any British chat show and they were on, you would probably switch over. You'd probably think, I wish this was Sarah Pascoe and Greg Davis. Yeah. People are not that thing of, when Parkinson would have, Gregory Peck on. Those days are long gone. There's a generation for whom film stars are not an exciting thing. It's fun to see people, as you say, on the red carpet. It's fun to see what people are wearing. But in terms of the allure of a movie star, certainly on British television, as I say, Adrien Brody won Oscars for his first, won Best Actor Oscars for his first 2 nominations. But if you were booking the Graham Norton show, you'd think twice.
Well, maybe that's why he treated the audience, the TV audience, as his therapist. Honestly, Richard, if I had to design the worst possible type of speech that an actor would give...
I would love you to do that for one of your columns.
I couldn't have done it as well as him. I thought he was going to win it anyway. There was sort of something like, maybe there'll be an upset, maybe it'll be Timothée Chalamet.
I predicted that one at least.
Yes, you did. The plot lines are somewhat hilarious. He's now in a relationship with Harvey Weinstein's ex, Georgina Chapman. On the way up to the stage, before he's about to make, of this incredibly, and very much in his mind, the incredibly classy speech, he threw like a massive wad of gum at her, and she caught it like, she caught it like it was a wedding bouquet. Maybe it is. And I just thought, oh my God, this is everything about this. It's really interesting. There's a certain type of actor, and obviously his talent is not even in question, but they're able to sort of osmotically absorb the world around them in such an amazing way, and to sort of then sublimate it and turn it into these great performances. But they cannot read a moment. They cannot read a room. And I just thought, oh God, you've thrown the gum already. Please let's do a quick and, slightly self-deprecating speech. But maybe all those those Graham Norton, etc. appearances he hasn't had, he told us, it's been so hard for me. It's like, okay, you won an Oscar in your first nomination, as you say, all those years ago, and now you've won another, okay?
Youngest person ever to win a Best Actor Oscar.
Yes, I know from people who've worked with him, whatever, he talked all the time during a lot of that middle period about how how it's not like it used to be, and how things aren't how they were before for him. And, you had to hear that story, like the Ancient Mariner, wherever he went. Anyway, now he feels that he's got his moment. I think it is classier just to say a decent thank you, whatever, and sort of move on. One thing I noticed is that nobody thanks the fans in Oscar speeches, which I think is so significant. Musicians are incredible at thanking their fans. You won't see anyone on the Grammys not up there saying, my amazing fans, okay? You get like agents, people no one cares about, and people who are probably genuinely terrible monsters being thanked at vast length. And no one ever says, thank you to the people who are still going out there and watching these things. Sean Baker, who, when he won, said, please, directors keep making movies for the big screen, parents take your children to the movie theatre. Some acknowledgement of the people who still actually turn out for these things would be quite nice.
Because otherwise, what are the award ceremony? Do you know the most thanked person in Oscar speech history?
I would love to.
I say person, it's God.
Is it?
Yeah, but the most thanked living person in Oscar speech history?
Weinstein?
Steven Spielberg.
Oh, is it? Mr. Spielberg, yeah.
They famously used to say that Harvey Weinstein had been thanked more than God, but he hasn't been thanked more than Spielberg either, so Spielberg still retains that crown.
Michael Ovitz used to need to count at every ceremony how many times he'd been thanked at every single one. But
it is fascinating, that thing of, if you have to understand that, the Oscars only exist as an entertainment proposition. I mean, by the way, they could absolutely still have the Oscars and recognise that, the best in craft in every single area in Hollywood without it being this enormous kind of juggernaut. But the fact that it is an enormous juggernaut means you do have to, as you say, read the room. You do have to think people at home are watching this. It's important that people are watching this because they're getting to see clips from movies they haven't seen before. They're getting to see who we hope to be the stars of tomorrow. If I do a speech that bangs on and is self-regarding, that's very, very hard for people to sit through. They tried to play him off, right? The orchestra started to play him off. He said, no, I am wrapping up. I've done this before.
It's not my first rodeo. Oh, my God. I mean, don't worry.
Adrien.
That is going to be clipped by every... I mean, it needed clipping, but that will be clipped by every single... And it will just go around, and it looks like the indulgence of Hollywood. So I'm afraid...
It needed clipping like a randy horse.
When I see someone an athlete who's trackside, who's overcome a load of, who's, maybe won earlier in their career, then has overcome a lot of setbacks, why is it that I feel so much better disposed to see that? I'll tell you, it's a number of things. First of all, they all know how to do it in about 10 or 15 seconds. You watch someone like Keely Hodgkinson talk about whatever does that. She can do it very, very quickly. Second of all, you slightly feel like, but that whole time you were living in the lap of luxury. And whether or not you like it, that's what people think about people who are movie stars. That it never got very hard for him. Even when they stopped getting attention, they were never really, really struggling and having to get up at dawn to train and having to borrow money from their parents in the way that athletes often do when they're trying to come back from those setbacks.
I mean, listen, he's probably got an indoor gym and a sauna. He's probably got all of that stuff. So, how hard can life be when you've got a lap pool?
And even if it is, you have to accept that that's not what people think, and you have to rise to that moment and just accept that there's sort of no way to say, I'm struggling and it's very, very difficult. When we hear athletes talk about, I think they're so much quicker. We believe that they've accomplished something that they've had to work unbelievably hard for over a huge number of years, and there's nothing to forgive. I feel you have to be very forgiving to get yourself through that much Oscars.
I would say this. I would say, if you see the extraordinary performances that some of these actors put in these movies, genuinely sort of genre-defining, era-defining performances, and then you watch some of the speeches these actors give when they're being themselves, I think what it means is that the absolute top Oscar of all should be the Screenwriters' Oscar.
It should be the last one. You're so right. It should be the writing one. You're so right.
But they're so used, the Adrien Brodys of this world, and listen, we're not picking on him. Well done, Adrien Brody. That's all good. But
don't worry, he's got an Oscar.
They're so used to being on a massive screen saying incredible things and making people cry, but not something that they wrote.
Yeah, and crying from being moved rather than wishing it would stop.
Exactly. Talking of, my brother sent me a fact. So Adrien Brody, I think, was the first actor ever to win from his first 2 Best Actor nominations. Can you name an actor who only appeared in 5 movies in his whole career, and all 5 of those movies were nominated for Best Picture?
Gosh, that's a great question. No, I can't.
It's a great question, isn't it?
No, I can't.
It is John Cazale, who was Fredo Corleone in The Godfather. He was in Godfather 2. He's in The Deer Hunter. He is in The Conversation with the late Gene Hackman. and he is also in Dog Day Afternoon. He died very, very young. He was in 5 movies, only 5 movies, all 5 of them. Those are the movies all nominated for a Best Picture Oscar. That's some going, isn't it? Well,
that's incredible. I did not know that fact, and I love it. I would say that my takeout for this over the whole thing is that entire ceremony needs to be completely rethought, because honestly, you can't argue with your own money, Hollywood. If you're not even advertising your films during it, then what are you really saying about this? If it's television and pharmaceutical companies, then I think we're looking at a pretty necrotic ceremony, TV event, whatever it is, and they need to completely rip it up. What's the worst that can happen? I mean, I really think that they need to rip it up. Maybe they need to involve the other platforms, different platforms more, social media. They certainly need to acknowledge the people who actually go out and see things a bit more. And I think that is some way back to becoming a bit more culturally relevant. It will never be the same as it was before, but I think you could become a bit more culturally relevant by just rethinking it completely. I think it's time.
Can we talk about the goodie bag that Best Actors and Best Supporting Actor nominees took home?
I so want you to. I should have had that.
$1 million worth of high-end personalised disaster relief to Bright Harbour. That sounds good, in the wake of the LA fires. And $50,000 worth of project management services from a North Hollywood contractor. I don't know if it's an individual one.
This is mortifying.
It gets more mortifying. $25,000 worth of liposuction.
Just get the jab.
Yeah, come on, guys. Do you know what? That's big liposuction. Thinking, why does no one love us anymore? There's all these
lipo had a terrible night, didn't they? God,
these liposuction surgeons
women now, it's painful to look at.
They're sitting there drumming their fingers, just thinking,
remember us?
Yeah. Elaine, can you check the phone again? Is it definitely working? A $240 chopping board. Okay. Better be some chopping board.
Oh, that would be nice for the help.
$750 worth of pre-rolled joints and edibles.
Okay.
You wouldn't have had that in the 60s, would you? A $3,500 voucher for a virtual wellness retreat that is accessible from your home. Wow.
Well, that also tells a story, doesn't it, Richard?
Yeah, doesn't it just?
Yeah.
But listen, it's you know me, I love people in the entertainment business, and that's what Hollywood's supposed to be. But you're absolutely right. That is not an evening you would sit through for any other reason than you used to sit through it in the good old days.
Yes, it's interesting. That's one thing I would sort of play out with, is that there are certain events that were always like the unmissables of the year in American culture, and the Super Bowl, obviously, the Oscars, and funnily enough, the Miss America pageant. It was rated. Everybody watched it. Now they no longer even broadcast it. You have to watch it along on sort of missamericapageant.com or whatever, and it just shows the way it can go.
Ironically, we all now miss America. And a shout out to Diane Warren, who 16th nominations, 16th loss as well. She's got one more to go to beat Greg P. Russell, who's a sound recorder. She's had 17 nominations without winning. But listen, she wrote, "If I could turn back time, how do I live? And I don't want to miss a thing." So again, she's doing okay. I bet she'd like an Oscar, and she would do a better speech than Adrien Brody.